All right, everybody. For those of you that I sent the other video to with no sound, I was told, so I'm redoing it here. Okay, so let's get rid of this. Hold on. Starting with S&P SPX. So this morning, I sent it to Dan because I wasn't here for first thing in the morning, but we've got a large open interest in puts and calls here, 6,100 calls. 60, 80, 60, 85 was a even much larger open interest at both of those strikes on the downside. So this is your battleground, so to speak, to see where traders would come in and those options opposing each other below the 6,100, and it's a whole number, and you can look at the charts here, SPX here. Yeah, you can see it's right on that minor support there. Getting below there certainly would open up the door to testing the pivot low on the hourly chart. So the hourly chart is up, the daily chart is up, the weekly chart. Well, let's see where it closes. Let's see if it closes at a new all-time high on the weekly time frame, or whether it closes below 6,100. Not that that would change the trend. Uh, well, it might change the hourly, but we'll see. You see the 5 minute here has broken down below the low of the day. And yesterday, there was this buying frenzy into the close, which typically is a bearish sign in the very short term. Doesn't change trends on the higher time frames. But when I've seen that in the past, historically it has led to the beginnings of some kind of correction, which could be sideways and chopping around. It doesn't have to be something of great significance. However, when something is moving up, like as this one was, especially in a almost parabolic kind of move or extreme move, there just tends to be this backing off during the end of the day. And so you see here that little tail, and then this was a red day, and there was a tail, and this one's got a little tiny tail right there, and that one, of course, does. But when they close right at the high of the day, historically, it's been a warning sign. It's just like now there's no reservation into holding, overnight, and the expectation is overwhelming that it's going to go higher. And so, in addition to that, if when we look at our market internal gauges, this was below the bands. This is the equity put call ratio. This was below the bands yesterday, and today it rips right straight up into the upper bands, and it's up there near the high of the day. The total was above there yesterday, and breadth hit a few days ago. So here we have the alignment of breadth and internals. So we've got a risk off for our internals. The last time was on November 25th. Well, anyway, take my word for it. November 25th was the last time reported that. It was like right here, and the S&Ps went higher. A lot of things topped out right on the 25th or shortly after. So they rarely turn on a dime when we get the signal, but been extremely reliable over the many, many years that I've used them. S&Ps continue to move lower. Another kind of heads up, which I mentioned yesterday pre-market, was although the S&Ps were moving up strongly, the futures were lagging. They haven't pushed up above the high. And most times, the futures will lead because futures traders get enthusiastic about what's happening during the day and they just continue to buy as long as it's going up. And sometimes they'll just lead or exceed where the broader market index is. That's not happening now. So there is some reservation. And you might say, well, it's kind of a good thing that there's some reservation, but look at the way it went up. Internals are where they are. Um, it's time to be a little more cautious. Um, you can see what's happening here on the 65-minute chart. There was this rejection, and now it's coming down kind of hard. We got a wide range bar, and we've had other wide range bars, but the internals weren't at an extreme, and prices weren't at resistance. So you got to take the wide range bar a little bit more respectfully here than over here where it was just a mess, and this went sideways And so we'll see there's 19 and a half minutes to go in this bar, so it's not done yet. We'll see if it closes below that pivot low, violating the uptrend or not. Uh, NASDAQ futures are down 100. Just inside stuff. It's at resistance here, but that's moving down. You can see the sideways consolidation there. We'll see what it does there at that major support level. Transports just kind of hanging here. I'm interested to see, do they continue to hang, show some relative strength since they led the way down, or do they break below this little support area? The Russell, just consolidating, holding up relatively well. And most times, the markets or stocks that led the way down and then come up off the low, initially they tend to outperform because they underperformed. And they tend to come down less because they've already been pounded down. That being said, let's just move this out of the way and we'll make that resistance for now. And initial support we'll put there, which lines up with the prior day's low. And so the prior day's low is always our first reference point of support in whatever we're looking at, and then we go to pivots. And you see there's no pivots here. So a violation of yesterday's low would be somewhat significant, and then there's an unfilled gap, down below, and we'll take it step by step. SMHs broke out this week, which is great. They're coming in a bit here. You can see the move down, starting to form a topping tail on the weekly time frame. Not that big of a deal to get a topping tail on a weekly time frame after a breakout. Ideally, it would have closed strong. But the daily trend turns up. We'll see how far this pulls back next week. Software, there's the head and shoulders top that formed in many indices that suggested it would go lower. It did. It broke down under the neckline, confirmed, looked like it was coming down here into the unfilled gap, and then it stabilized. And then, the news came out about 0.1% less than anticipated inflation, which, okay, that lit the buying. And so we'll see what happens next week, what the Fed is going to do. Trump wants them to lower. We'll see if they obey or whether they're truly independent or not. Oil, he's been talking bearishly about, that the Saudis have to lower the price or increase supply. So far this has pulled back in a normal way into an area of minor support. It's stabilized there. We'll see if it flips up or what it's going to be doing. Gold pushing up to the prior highs. I talked about this multiple times over the last few weeks about this messy move up. I thought it would go up, but it was just too erratic and messy for me to want to participate. But nonetheless, it moved up, and you can see, up, down, up, bottoming tail bars, kind of messy. You'd have to give it a whole lot of wiggle room versus the way it was, moving up here in a much more controlled manner. What it is. Silver hasn't been doing too much, but you may want to set an alert up here, see if it pokes up. You can see the weekly chart is a little downside shakeout, and it's consolidating at resistance. You can see there. Interest rates, we talked about earlier in the week. Uptrend, pulling back to support, looking for it to stabilize, and really not doing too much. I also pointed out, this resistance area and this pullback. And then the weekend letter, the last weekend letter, we discussed or reviewed how the reaction to getting above 4.5%. So it backed off from this area. So you want to keep an eye on this next week to see if it turns into a red bar ignored or whether this continues to move lower, which equities will like and put somewhat of a floor under the market, or whether it flips back up again. We looked at a lot of regionals are starting to report now. And so this looks still okay. It's a little messy. It's above support. You want to see if it violates that or not. Got a nice weekly bar and it's not giving back. Probably waiting for more of them to report. But if this can clear these highs, that should certainly move higher. And yeah, IWM, consolidating there, caught under the 50, and that support, mid caps, holding up pretty darn well. Right? Backed off a little bit. So short-term concerns, intermediate term things look good, and we'll see how much they pull back or the lack thereof and what they do, and that's how we will reassess what's going on a continuous basis, and measure what holds up better, shows relative strength or weakness. Like technology coming after this breakdown, retracing back up, that's a positive. If they can go sideways here into next week, anticipate that they will go higher. So as we continue to do the analysis, we'll update accordingly. If you have questions, email us. Greg and Dan at Master Trader.